on this edition of INN CEO Talks, joining me from Perth, Australia is Roland Gotthard, who is the exploration manager at eMetals. eMetals you can find on the ASX, and its symbol is EMT. Roland, welcome. Thank you for reaching halfway around the world to join me via online interview here to tell me about the well. First of all, your company. Let's give viewers a sense about the your focus on high value, high margin, high quality ore bodies, and what you're doing to realize that promise that you've or mandate that you've set for yourself. Then we'll talk about the 4 projects that you've got underway and let people, wrap up with a note on, where do we go from here? And along the way, we're going to tell people why this is a good investment. So, Tell me a little bit about eMetals.
eMetals is a junior exploration company. We relisted and recomplied on the ASX in February of this year, raised $4.5 million. And the projects that we started out the year with were the Nadu Well Tungsten project. We had the Cooks Creek Tungsten project and the Twin Hills Gold project. And since then, we've identified new opportunities in our projects in the rare metals space and the strategic metals space. And we've acquired some new projects, and we're now starting exploration.
Okay. So I got my notes here. I had to actually write a number of these things down because I'm going, there's no way that I will be able to have it roll off my head. But you talk about the Poona project as having a high potential for nickel sulfide mineralization. Why is it important that you recognize that potential, and what's its relationship to what will be the byproduct of the ore body that you will be exploring?
We started out at the lithium in the lithium space at Poona, and we've taken some soil samples, and there's been existing soil samples and drilling, and we recognised that there was coincident nickel, copper, and cobalt in certain soil samples, and the level of nickel at 0.15% was quite high, but the cobalt and the copper was saying there's a real chance of some nickel sulfides here instead of laterite. And the key is that the sulfide is much easier to get out of the rock. You can float that and smelt that. So we ran the samples for platinum group elements, and that's a very sensitive indicator of the presence of sulfides. And we've got some PGE results up to 68 parts per billion. And to put that into context, some of the more well-known nickel prospects in West Australia at the moment, they've got a similar level of PGEs and known sulfides. So the indications are there that there's sulfides within the fresh rock, and we have to now complete our soil program that's going on at the moment, get the results back, and then we'll be looking at doing some electromagnetic geophysics to define bedrock conductor, and then hopefully drilling that sometime in the new year.
So it's my understanding that the property is really not severely, but it is underexplored. There's only been 30 or 40 holes that have been drilled to date in the past, so there's a rich opportunity. What's the plan moving forward as far as putting drills in the ground?
That's where we're doing our ground geophysics, because we have to get, obviously, permission from the local stakeholders to clear drill lines and do ground disturbing activities. So that can be an expensive and long process, and we want to do that right so that we've got the stakeholder engagement going forward, and that includes pastoralists and the local Indigenous people. So the first stage is to fully define the geochemical footprint and then use geophysics to investigate the drill targets. At the moment, we're looking at a 9-kilometre strike length of prospective rocks, and somewhere within that 9 kilometres where, most nickel deposits are only 200 or 300 metres long. So we need to really put in the groundwork to identify a 200, 300, 400, 500 metre long zone, and then put in some drill holes into that. So that's the kind of process that we're going through at the moment, just on the nickel. There's also other opportunities on that project. It's quite an anomalous area. There's a lot of lithium, caesium-tantalum prospectivity in that particular tenement. And we've also got other tenements around there for another 700 square kilometres or so of ground that we have got an application in for, and we will be exploring next year.
So these metals, these ore bodies do meet your mandate of having high value, high margin, high quality ore bodies that you would be able to take to market. What exactly is the market for these minerals?
For nickel and copper, obviously, it's the normal base metals. Platinum group elements is obviously precious metals. They'll probably be a byproduct of the nickel. Our other elements that we're looking for at the Poona project, lithium is involved in batteries, obviously, and into that sort of technology space. Caesium is a very valuable additive to drill fluids for deep oil and gas exploration wells. And an example of that was Pioneer Resources found a caesium deposit near Kalgoorlie, and within 18 months they'd been paid $8 million to take that caesium by the off-taker. So if we can find a caesium deposit, and we're talking about 40,000 tonnes, it's a very small ore body we're looking for, but it can be quite valuable, and the margins are quite high. It took them 6 weeks to dig the ore body out once they'd done the pre-strip, and they've been selling into the United States specialty fluids market for 18 months. So yeah, that's what we're looking for. And we're also finding there's quite a lot of tantalum, and the grades of the tantalum in the rock chips at 0.1% are pretty high. Most of the tantalum mines that run as tantalum are in the sort of 200 to 400 ppm range. So we're looking at trying to find a ore body of that sort of level, and it might only be a couple of million tonnes, but you can make good margins out of that. And but tantalum is used in cell phones, batteries, and technology space. Yeah.
You know, you mentioned earlier relations with indigenous populations, and that raises the question about what is the legislative environment like in the region for when it comes to mining, and what kinds of relationships are you able to consolidate with local indigenous groups? Because you know, this is a consideration that anybody has to think about. Are you able to develop those positive working relationships that will allow you to take this through to commercialization should you get to that point?
The Poona project is on what's known as the World Range land titles, native title claim. That's managed by the local Indigenous people who live to the north of the project, and we have to provide an update to them every 6 months, and they will say, we want to come and inspect what you're doing, and they're quite able to come down, inspect what we're doing, see whether they agree with what we're doing, and they'll tell us pretty plain English, no, we don't want you to do that, or we want you to do this, avoid that area. They also are quite keen on getting work. That's one of the conditions that's quite common with Indigenous land use agreements, is an opportunity to provide work for the local Indigenous youth in field work, sampling, drilling, heritage clearance, etc. There's heritage claims and protection areas in the tenement that we have to manage and avoid. You know, there's a whole bunch of environmental conditions as well, which is pretty common across the industry, protecting large trees in an area that's mostly scrubland, you know, those trees can be quite important culturally for the local Indigenous people. They've got burial areas out there as well that you have to respect the boundaries of, etc. So there's
Mm-hmm.
it's the same as in Northern America. The
Right.
indigenous people have been there for thousands of years, and we have to try and understand that history and work with them in terms of what they would do in a potential mining situation. That is due to the law says that we have to negotiate in good faith with them,
Right.
and they have to understand and agree with the mining development. So we haven't found anything yet, but we are looking forward to bringing a mine online that can provide benefits to everyone.
So, a couple of key components, of course, in the development of any mine site is infrastructure. What is your access to infrastructure, especially if you're in protected lands? Are you going to be able to get product out to market? So that's one part of infrastructure. The other side is like, what about the human resources component? Is there enough talent in the area for you to be able to work with to be able to realize this opportunity as well?
Yeah, the Poona project's 70 kilometres from the township of Kew. There's a large gold mine, Big Bell, which is 15 kilometres from our project. That's serviced by sealed roads. There's a highway goes from Kew down to the port of Geraldton. Any of the products that we're looking at are not bulk commodities. They're quite small volume, small tonnage per annum, 20, 30, 40,000 tonnes per annum of product. There's quite well developed infrastructure and logistics companies in West Australia that are quite adept at hauling product long ranges via road trains. There's good communications, but every mine development, obviously, you have to clear your infrastructure corridors. You have to work around existing infrastructure, etc. So it's quite a complicated process in the end. But we are looking at a small volume product, high margin. A ton of tantalite concentrate, for instance, would be $20,000 a ton of contained tantalum in the concentrate. We
Mm-hmm.
produce 10,000 per annum or 5,000 even. It's not a lot of trucks to go down the highway in a year. Um, so yeah, we're in this sort of space of the specialty metals. You're talking small volumes to specific off takers and quite small mine footprints compared to, say, an iron ore mine or a large scale copper mine or something like that.
So let's say there's somebody watching right now. They're going, okay, Roland. Before we even get to your other three projects, I like what I'm hearing here. But what's in it for me at this point if I invest in your company? Think about it from the investor's perspective right at the moment. Why is this a good time for them to get behind eMetals?
Uh, in terms of the market for nickel and lithium in particular, uh, they're both used in the modern lithium-ion batteries in various chemistries, and we're not going to get too far off in the weeds there, but lithium batteries obviously need lithium. A lot of the chemistries that are being used now are using nickel and or cobalt. So it's a good exposure to the electrification of the automobile fleet throughout the world, also static battery installations, for instance, the Tesla mega batteries, etc. In terms of tantalum, a non-African source of tantalite is going to be quite important for the ethical considerations. The majority of tantalite comes from the Congo, and there's obviously concerns about that. So any source of tantalite coming from Australia, in particular, has got good ethical considerations attached to it in terms of sourcing responsibly, etc. And then we get into the other projects which involve rare earths, and obviously there's a lot of friction between for instance, the Western world, in the Five Eyes nations in inverted commas, and China, and the dominance of China in the rare earth space, there's a lot of geopolitical, um, investment from the government. And, there's a recent executive order from the President of the United States um, looking to secure a non-Chinese source of rare earth minerals. So, and we're seeing that interest in Australia in terms of the exploration for rare earths is, going up considerably. So that's where eMetals is working. We're in the specialty metals, rare metals space. The metals that the West needs and doesn't want to be involved with certain regimes or certain people, or is afraid that the tap will be turned off. And so, that's where eMetals is strategically looking.
Well, I think that that's a very valid point, and it's one that more and more people are paying attention to. What's your ability to get into, as you say, those Five Eyes nations, and be accepted in those markets is going to be start to play a far more important role. So, somebody might be saying that's great, but you have other projects. You've got what is it, Muggle, the project. You've got Twin Hills, and I love the name of Norduel. Tell me a little bit about those three projects as well.
The Nadu Well project is one of the ones that was involved in the float, and it was a tungsten project. There's some tungsten skarns there over about 12 kilometres of length. They've been drilled in the past unsuccessfully, and we're looking at drilling with diamond to avoid the potential quality issues that's happened in the past with percussion drilling. And going through the project and the historical work, I realised there's actually some pegmatites there, and that's a granite-associated mineralisation. The pegmatites have enriched rare earths, 10 times the normal level that you'd expect. So we started to look into the rare earths and the tantalum and niobium, and our first batch of soils came back quite enriched in those. Up to 300 ppm niobium in a stream sediment sample was quite interesting. And so we started to look into this, and one of the tenements next door had a very large pegmatite on it. We realised that that was probably the source of a large amount of this anomalism, and so we did the deal with Venus Metals, which is they've moved from their 2008-2014 focus on lithium into gold, so they were quite keen to do a deal on that. And we've now completed 1,600 odd stream sediments and 550 odd rock chip samples, and we've moved from just looking at stream anomalies, and we've traced the anomalism back to rock chips, and we've got some skarn altered gabbro at 580 ppm of rare earths in it, and I think the key is that this is only one rock chip, and it's only one outcrop.
Right.
In a very remote area. So we have to go back, and we're hoping that that 500 ppm is just the sort of the teaser, and so you might find something higher grade. And we've also realised, well, if we're going to be in this space, we need to dominate it, as much as we can. It's a competitive pegging environment out there. Some other people have pegged 5,000 square kilometres of this region, but we've been using a very systematic model that we've developed. We've identified certain alkaline granites that are quite radiometrically enriched, and we've pegged those granites. And so they're smaller tenements, but they're much more focused than some of the competitors, I believe. And, some of the historical work that's occurred over these new areas we've pegged, and this is all publicly available information, but it's 0.16% lanthanum, which is the rare earth, and that's very enriched in a stream sediment. So we have to obviously take these tenements to grant and then do some work to find where that stream sediment anomaly is coming from. But we've we've got a good target in the granites. We believe that there's pegmatites there which would be feeding this anomalism, and we need to go out and sample them. So, we're on the case, so to speak.
Right.
Yeah.
We could have a whole conversation just about that project, but we got two others, and we've got only a certain amount of time. Tell me about the others.
Yeah. The Twin Hills Gold Project was another one that came in with the float, and that's been there's a historical gold mine excised from within the tenement. Another small private entity owns that, and we've been in discussions with them in the past, and nothing's happened. But we're looking on our tenement for a repeat of that mineralisation, and the historical mine has intersections of say 2 metres at 15 grams a tonne gold, so it's quite high grade. Small targets, and looking at the historical work, there's a lot of very large geochemical anomalies that we have on there. So we've undertaken a series of auger drilling in the last year, done 580 holes, and we're looking at now very much more contained, focused anomalies of sort of 200, 300 metre size, and they're sitting over magnetic features and map structures, and we're in the process. There's a guy up there clearing the lines to drill in next year. And in reference to your question about access to manpower, there's also there's a huge boom in exploration in Western Australia. So accessing a drill rig is difficult. We've tried to get one before Christmas, and we just can't get it. So.
Wow.
So we've been working away over the last year on clearing with heritage surveys, etc., and obviously the COVID pandemic's put a big spanner in the works of that. It's been difficult to get on ground with our Indigenous consultants to clear these areas, and we've been working through that process, and now hopefully we'll be drilling it at the Twin Hills project, looking again for a small high-grade gold deposit, and everything we're doing there is going in the right direction. We thought we'll go test it with the augers and generate a small tight anomaly, and that's what we've done. And so now we have to drill that anomaly, and we'll just see. They're very small ore bodies to hit, but they're very rich, and there's a little bit of luck involved in exploration.
I think there's always luck involved in exploration, isn't there? Okay,
Yeah.
Final project.
The final project at Cooks Creek, which is in the Pilbara region, in the northeast of the state. It's a tungsten project, veins associated with granites hosted in the greenstones. There's been historical mining there down to about 9 or 10 metres depth, and some very high-grade results have been high-grade production, sort of 6%. Anecdotally, the records are very spotty, but we're in the process now of finishing our heritage surveys in order to drill that again in the new year. And we're targeting, it's a long strike from tungsten mining's Big Hill deposit, and that's a 15 million tonnes or something at 0.15% tungsten, and we're looking for an extension to that. And we just have to see how we go. Again, a bit of luck,
Yeah. So with each of these projects, if they start to prove out, is your plan then to vend them into a major, if possible, or do you foresee, because they're all smaller projects, raising the capital needed to mine them yourself?
Not a lot of major mining companies get involved in these specialty metals, because they're looking for 40-plus year mine lives, and there's not a lot of pegmatite kind of mineralisation ends up at 40 years mine life. You've got a few examples, for instance, Pilgrim Minerals in Pilgrim is a 40-year mine life, but even that, the Rio Tinto is involved in lithium exploration, but they're looking at brine projects and similar things like that. So I wouldn't foresee that there'd be a major
Right.
involved in any of these things. In terms of the rare earth space, finding a deposit it'll either be a very large, lower grade ionic clay deposit, which is not as refractory as other monazite or zircon or xenotime hosted deposits, or it'll be a much higher grade, smaller deposit. And we're talking sometimes that these deposits are, again, 40,000, 100,000, 200,000 tonnes of 5-10% rare earths. And they are, again, they're not the scale of the majors. So the process will be to drill, find the discovery, scope out the size of it, and then understand the metallurgy and understand the processing side of rare earths, etc. And that process requires funding a bit yourself, and then you may be able to find a much more established rare earth miner to do a joint venture, and there's also some consultancies and some metallurgical firms which are developing process routes for these refractory minerals, the monazites, etc. So there can be opportunities there to work with the scientific side of the industry, the metallurgists, the research institutes, etc., and to attract the government funding for that. Some of the funding opportunities for the rare earths in Australia have attracted $20-30 million worth of government support, but it is a long process to get these metallurgical solutions done, but the payoff at the end of it can be pretty lucrative. For instance, the Northern Minerals Browns Range deposit is a very dysprosium rich. That's trading for $1,200 a kilo at the moment. So when you've got 400 grams per tonne, it becomes quite valuable. If you can, but they've been working away at that project for over a decade. So,
well, that is really the benefit of working in that rare earth space, that you've got smaller deposits, but they are worth, as you point out, they have high value, high margins, and so you may not be looking to vend out into a major, but you do have a significant opportunity, and that's what makes it interesting. And everything you've told me so far makes me say you're going to have a really interesting 2021. You've got a number of things underway.
At the moment our priority is the nickel, because that's a much better understood commodity. And there's a lot of there's something like $500-600 million has been invested in early to mid-stage nickel projects in West Australia. Some of them, for instance, Chalice Mines, Azure Minerals, Estrella. Just between those three, there's over $200 million has been raised in capital for drilling out this deposit. So I think our nickel sulphide target at the Poona project, any form of success there, I would think would generate a substantial amount of interest. And we obviously are in the process of generating that first drill hole. And, bit of luck.
Yeah, well, a lot of information there for anybody who's interested in your company, the projects that you're working on, and of course, we'll be watching. We'll want to see and get an update from you in a few months as to how things are progressing. Thank you ever so much for taking the time to share this really interesting insight into the projects that you have underway there in southwestern Australia. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.